Good afternoon. My name is Nicole Portee, and I am a member of the Denver Women's Commission. And it is my honor to offer some insights on the topic of family-friendly workplaces. Gender equity in the workplace is largely influenced by the extent to which workplace policies and practices are perceived as family-friendly and inclusive of the many ways that families are created. The need to ensure that our workplace are compatible with raising a healthy family has always been important. However, this need has only grown over time. Over the last 50 years, households in which both parents work outside of the home has increased from 40 to 60%. As a primary caregiver, in many families, the ability for women to integrate the demands of work with the demands of interest in caring for the family is a fundamental concern for women seeking employment or deciding whether to stay at home staying at home or staying at their current place of employment. Employees who experience work environment show improvements in employee satisfaction, productivity, and retention. Therefore, it is a clear link between having family-friendly policies and the ability for women to engage actively and productively in the workplace. And this ability has clear impact on their ability to achieve gender equity in a variety of dimensions. Workplace policies that support healthy families and communities include a range of supports, from flexibility to paid leave to programs that focus on worker well-being. Family-friendly policies include a mix of flexibility and stability in work schedules. On the other hand, workers need the ability to adjust work hours to attend their family requirements, such as doctor appointments, parent-teacher conferences, or caring for sick children. Flexibility in scheduling can also manage the stresses and time demands associated with transportation. On the other hand, many women rely on stable and predictable levels of earnings to ensure that they can meet their financial needs. When working schedules and hours are paid employment, they vary. A second critical policy is getting paid time off from work without endangering one's earnings or even the security of one's employment. This includes paid sick leave, paid vacation leave, and paid family leave. There is a tremendous variation across organizations as well as levels in organizations, and it has a disproportionate impact on all people in different demographic groups. A third key policy area of concern is the provisions of supportive services. There are three major services that can have significant impact on women. These are employee assistance programs to help deal with issues of mental health and stress associated with relationships, life circumstances, financial problems, and others. Having child care programs available nearby or on site. Lactation support for breastfeeding mothers. These kinds of family-friendly policies may sound like nice things to do. However, studies show they make good business sense. For example, providing paid leave for women increases retention, and it also enhances organizations' ability to attract the best workers. It improves employee engagement and has been used to enhance brand equity, such as when organizations aim to be known as the best employer in the city or the state. There is also interesting research that has developed that showed that whether or not countries have family-friendly policies, is the single most important factor that determines how happy parents are being parents. And in the United States, it turns out it's not at the top of the list of countries.
And from the talk you just heard, you had a broad spectrum that applies to all organizations. And similar to the first panel that we had this morning, we're blessed to have with us 7 people who have actually done places in their workplace to improve family-friendly policies. So you will again hear very practical ideas about what can be done. If I can ask the panelists to join us now. Their bios are in your book. You can look at them later. But as they're coming across the stage, first with us is Thornton's mayor, Heidi Williams. And then we have Trish Stiles from the city of Bennett. Whoops, they're in a different order. That's okay. And the rest of the panel are Gretchen Selfridge from Chipotle, and Karen McNeil Miller from the Colorado Health Foundation, Mayor Susan Jones of Boulder, Pamela Hardy from DeVita, and Stephen Chang from the National Equity Project. I'm going to start with you, Mayor. What we thought you could talk with us about is how we use community planning and capital investments to actually have an impact on family-friendly policies.
That's a great question, thank you. Thornton is now the 6th largest city in Colorado, and as a growing community, we've really strived to keep family first and really tried hard to preserve the feeling of a small community. And so we really do band together when there are things that need to be talked about or worked on. We still have that small community feel. We're only 61 years old, so we're a very young city. We use planning to really work on establishing parks and recreation in all of our newer developments. We do have parks near every neighborhood in our community. Almost everyone can walk to a park. We have a lot of trails. We actually have a state-of-the-art trail system that really gets people where they want to go, whether it's bicycling, pedestrians, or other means. We have programming at our rec centers, and actually we're building a new rec center at our northern growth area, and we serve toddlers, youth, adults, older active adults. So we really just strive to make sure that our entire community is taken care of. Festivals are a huge investment in our community. We have 4 festivals each year, brings tens of thousands of people to each festival, not just Thornton residents, but actually residents from all over the region. And this is a really great way to build community and work on bringing families together and having family-friendly policies. We have a great arts and humanities program. Additional planning, though, that we're working on that's really important. The first thing is affordable housing. What we're finding is there's no silver bullet to providing affordable housing or to encourage builders or others to either rent or create for-sale product that people can afford, and so we're working on that. In an unprecedented move, we actually just approved last year to add 56 new police officers to our workforce. What this will do is provide safety and the feeling of safety to our residents. Because we were growing so fast, we were just understaffed in that area. And we've also just recently approved the ability to add summer programs to our low-income areas. A lot of those kiddos don't have access to our recreation programs, whether it's for financial reasons or really there's no transportation. So we're going to go to them. We're taking pop-up parks and other different summer programs to the kiddos who really can't access those services elsewhere. And so, we're doing our very best to provide that. I think there are some things we could work on as a community. As I started researching for this panel today, I still think that the city for its employees could provide lactation rooms. I found out we're not doing that, so that's going to be something I'll be working on. We don't have parking for expectant mothers, and we don't have gender-neutral restrooms at any of our facilities. So as we move forward, we have to try to figure out how to retrofit that and make those amenities available to women.
Mayor Williams, typically people don't think of capital investments other than the kind of bricks and mortar. Do you ever get any pushback from people in terms of the way in which your capital investments are clearly supporting families?
Not really in the city of Thornton, because the city of Thornton, our average age is around 35, and so we have a lot of families in Thornton. We kind of started out as a bedroom community. We've now made primary employment a really big focus in the city, but people who have families or who are older adults that are retiring, they really want to have all that recreation and family events available, and so we don't get pushback on that. Everybody's really thrilled to live in Thornton.
That's fantastic. Thank you.
Not to brag.
Next, Stephen Chang from the National Equity Project. The question that we have for you, how do you address structural biases within policies, and how do you overcome those kinds of barriers to family-friendly work?
Good afternoon. It's a great honor to be here. Our approach for National Equity Project is heavily informed by the work of John Powell at the Haas Institute for a Fair and Inclusive Society. Highly recommend his work if you're not familiar with it. But I'll speak just from our framework and some of the things that, that we think about in this work, that when you talk about the structural nature of bias and inequity, that you're really talking about what does it mean to take a systemic lens and approach to addressing inequity. And some of the pieces that aren't part of our conversation and therefore create insufficient solutions are that we make the problems that we see present and we make the problems that we see individualized. When in fact what we are actually seeing is the product of a system. And there's a saying that we have, which is systems produce what they were designed to produce. And I hear a lot of nods. And so there's a few pieces that have to be part of the conversation if we're really going to make transformational progress as opposed to incremental progress. And so one of those is this understanding of systems of advantage and disadvantage, and recognizing how is it that many of our systems are designed to create unequal outcomes for different groups, whether that's based on gender or race or income or immigrant status, all different levels of marginalization. The other is implicit bias and the negative narratives and stereotypes that are perpetuated through our society and our media, and the ways that those actually contribute to the ways that we can unconsciously be reproducing some of these patterns. And then the third is our history. And that in many cases, the reason why we have the patterns that we have was intentional. That the reason why women do not receive equal pay, the reason why we do not have female-friendly workplaces is because they were not seen as equal, they were not seen as deserving of that, and also to protect the advantage and the success of men. And so that's... So there's a little balance in that, is how is it that we name that as a historical truth, that you can go back to our legal documents, going all the way back to, just prior to women getting the vote, to just prior to the Civil Rights Act, that we're able to have that conversation as a context, but also not as a source of blame and judgment that we get stuck in. So how is it that we say our intentions are different than our original design, and how is it that we transcend that? But that really does mean pulling back many layers and the will to do that. And so systemic change is about at what point does an organization explicitly make that commitment and say, we acknowledge that this is historical, that this was intentional. This is not about something we don't know how to do. This is about things we are doing, and we need to stop doing them. And so I'll just say very briefly, there's like kind of three layers to this that I kind of think of, and we often use sort of an iceberg as a metaphor for a system with, kind of what's on top is, and poking out of the water is what we most photograph and see, but not necessarily what actually is the larger mass of the iceberg and what creates that tip that's coming out. And so at that surface level is almost just kind of the insurgent practices and the interrupting practices that at an individual level in what may be experienced as an oppressive system, how is it that you begin to interrupt that and name that and start to raise some consciousness? The kind of slightly deeper level is where you start to actually make a commitment as an organization, where you actually start to say, we're actually going to start measuring and set goals around diversity, representation in our leadership. And then that deeper and core level is when you actually start to question what is the dominant culture narrative around what leadership looks like. And it is a very male derived and benefiting paradigm. And so how is it that we say, if we actually are saying we want this to be an inclusive society or an inclusive organization, how is it that we have to rethink the very culture around that we're part of? Sorry.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Okay, next we're going to hear from Mayor Susan Jones of Boulder. And the question that we have for you, Suzanne, is how, in fact, can you give us some examples of the kinds of policies that you're using in local government to really support women in the workplace?
Absolutely. And let me just say, thank you so much for including us in this very, very important discussion. And thanks to Denver for their leadership on this. Being a more welcome and inclusive community is a really important value in Boulder and something we've been working really hard on. And gender equity is an important aspect of that. Like most things, it's a work in progress, but we've been making some progress that we're proud of, and I'm happy to share some of those ideas and do an interchange about them. One of the big suites of things that we do is try to have a really robust employee benefits program to support employees and their families. One new policy we just added is 12 weeks of paid parental leave, so that employees don't have to dip into their sick time or vacation time. It's for men and women, biological or adopted. We are working hard to set up lactation rooms and resources in city facilities across town. We are supportive of flexible work scheduling and teleworking. We have an employee assistance program that applies to not only employees, but anybody living at home. So whether it's financial consultation, legal consultation, marital counseling, problems around elder care, you name it, there's support for the family members as well. We also are looking into options around providing more child care. We have a very robust well-being program from on-site wellness screenings and that sort of things, all sorts of programs around weight management, stress management, and so on that I think is very important. We are also, we have a very in-depth career lab and development and learning program that a lot of employees partake in that we think is very helpful in supporting career advancement and leadership development. We are working hard on the diversity and inclusion aspects. We're hiring a full-time diversity officer that we hope to have in place by the end of the summer, and are doing intercultural development inventory work with the senior leadership at the city to raise our awareness and look at gaps in terms of practices and policies that we want to address. One final suite of things I want to talk about is wages. We just finished a gender equity wage study. It's hot off the presses. Kudos to Denver. Turns out that we also rank among the top in the country when it comes to wage equity. We're at about 88%, which ain't 100%, but apparently it's one of the top in the country. And also high representation of women in our workforce at 47%, and also in our senior leadership. So more to be done, but proud of that. One last thing is we also have a robust livable wage practice, which we just added to. I'm going over, but I'll just say that we decided to increase it to our self-sufficiency standard of $15.67 per hour as a minimum. Fantastic. And apply it to all full-time, part-time, temporary, and non-standard employees, and also to contractors that provide janitorial, landscaping work, and emergency medical services. So.
Congratulations. That's fantastic. Outstanding. Trish Stiles, the city manager from Bennett, Colorado.
Thank you.
Our
My table did promise they were going to cheer for me, so
okay.
thank you.
All right.
Way to go, table 7.
So the question we have for you is, what have you learned about how to maximize the kind of positive impact that offering educational leave to employees, what does that do for the employees and what does that do for the organization?
Thank you. So Bennett's a little bit unique. We're a small community right now, but we're growing. I only have about 22 employees, but each and every single employee is on a learning and development plan. And I don't mean training plan, because training implies I'm just trying to mold you into doing one specific task, versus learning is really about a broad set of skills in order for you to experiment and engage in your work. And so we really pride ourselves that everyone has one of those plans. They are actively engaged in them. The other thing that I think that we do is we offer time in order to go engage in those plans. So I allow my employees to attend conferences, attend different trainings that might broaden their horizon. We are looking on making sure that everyone, if they want a certification, they can do that. If they want to go into some sort of higher education, we allow time for them to do that. I think us being flexible is probably most noted with one of my employees. It's actually he in this circumstance. He's a veteran, and he has just one class left in order to get his bachelor's degree. So it's math class. It's not his favorite subject. So he had talked to me, and we talked about having a tutor in order to get him through this class. And so I told him, I said, why don't you just take the last hour of the day and go to tutoring, because we need to get you to get that bachelor's degree. So we're working on that with him, and hopefully here by the end of the summer he will have that, and I promised him I'd throw him a little office party too. I think the other important thing is I really encourage my employees, while it's good to learn more skill sets about your job, about how to make a better Excel spreadsheet, I think the other thing that's important is offering opportunities for your employees to learn how to quite honestly just be a better human being. Learn how to interact with your coworkers. Go to classes that give you emotional intelligence. You know, I think about way back in high school, I learned plenty about calculus and took all of those kind of classes. I haven't used calculus in years. But I do think it's important that I have to have skills in order to negotiate with people, in order to bring my team together, and those are the opportunities that I think sometimes we overlook, or we say, oh, I don't know if there's quite enough in the budget. But those are the skills that are going to enable your employees to really grow and I think be better in their jobs. So you have to kind of balance both that skill set bucket and sort of that emotional intelligent bucket. It allows you to have a better employee. And I also would add that I'm very fortunate. I have a very supportive board. They even encourage me to get training. So I'll be off at the end of the month to go do a couple of trainings. But so it really reflects with my employees that it starts from the top down and everyone's engaged in that.
Trish, your examples bring to mind one of the pieces of important data is that most pay scales are set by the hard skills that people bring to the job. And yet all kinds of data supports that people who do eventually be the most successful excel in the soft skills, if we can say it that way.
Yep.
Have you had any experience with thinking about bringing soft skills into pay scales as an element?
So actually, we review each and every employee on those soft skills. They have objectives within their performance evaluation, the things that we know we need to get done, but we also have a set of skills that talk about their leadership skills, their ability to get results from others is one of our questions. So that's part of the overall composite score, but we are on a strict pay for performance only plan. So we do incorporate those skills into our performance evaluation and reward our employees justly.
Thank you. Our next speaker, Karen McNeil Miller, President and CEO of the Colorado Health Foundation. We asked her because she has the opportunity to give us a very special look on the meaning of family-friendly workplaces. Can you tell us about the health impacts of really supporting these kinds of policies in the workplace?
Absolutely. And thank you all for having me here this afternoon. So the potential health impacts of not employing some of the practices we've heard about are many, and they're very real. So any of us that are trying to manage a work life and a home life and a spiritual life and a community life and a family life, there's always some level of stress involved. The stress can ebb and flow, but there's always some level of stress. And so what happens when we're under stress? Our bodies manifest that stress somehow. So for some of us, we get back problems, you get neck and shoulder problems, blood pressure can go up, your weight can fluctuate up and down, you can not sleep, you can have intestinal issues. And if you want to believe my husband and children, another cause is extreme irritability.
I think you're not alone.
So all of those things can manifest themselves through our body, and then that takes us off focus. We aren't able to focus. It takes away our energy. It makes us not as productive. And so just by doing some of these practices, as many as possible certainly, but at least a few, you help people manage that stress and lessen that stress so that they can be focused for the purpose that they are in our institutions for 10, 11, 12 hours a day. And so it's very important, and there's a real and direct impact on health.
Can you give some examples of where, probably statistical, where you've seen actually a workplace that introduces these policies that their employees' health improves? Do you have that kind of data?
There are lots of data around that, particularly, well, the main thing you can do is pay people a living wage, pay people a wage in which they can handle their daily necessities and not have to worry about that. But particularly for those of us who have school-age children at home or are dealing with elder issues, the time to be able to just attend to our families so that we can feel good about that. Because if there's anything you want to feel good about, is that you are first and foremost being a good mom or being a good daughter or a good daughter-in-law, whatever it is. And if we can help women, not just women, but men and women, but particularly here we're talking about women, if we can help us feel that we are being productive and being the kind of caregiver that we want to be, then you will have our loyalty, you will have our support, we will be healthy, our absentee rate goes down, health insurance premiums go down for the company. All of those things are benefits to the bottom line.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Gretchen Selfridge from Chipotle. We had a lot of focus here today on government because we have so much support from the mayors and communities all around Denver. But the for-profit business sector is equally significant in terms of its possibilities. Can you talk with us about how the private sector supports family-friendly policies?
Yeah, absolutely, and thank you very much. Actually, this is a good segue from what Karen was just talking about. You know, for a business to create and support the family-friendly policies, excuse me, we need to really realize the value and the importance of human capital. So in other words, you know, it's easy for a business, a for-profit business for sure, to think about the bottom line when implementing, you know, a new program or a policy. But it's also, the costs that are sometimes overlooked are when you don't implement something. And you know, everybody always wants to focus on what it's going to cost to implement it, but what happens if you don't implement it, and what comes from that? And you know, when we're not implementing a new program or a policy that can help our families or our employees and their families, then we're not going to have their engagement. And that's really important. You know, it's easy to talk about when you aren't keeping, when you don't have retention, the costs that come with turnover. You have, you know, you've got to do recruiting again, and then you've got to do the hiring, and then you've got to do the training, and those costs can be really substantial. But there's also a cost that we don't know about, and that's the lack of engagement from an employee who's not happy or has things going on at home. And, you know, in other words, they could be physically at work, but their mind's not there. And that is, it's not a cost that you can even account for. but it's really, really important. And we're excited at Chipotle, because we've been around for almost 24 years now, based here in Denver, right across the street. So, but we're excited about what we've done because we've recognized that, and we've put a lot of different policies and procedures in place to help our folks. And some of the things that we have implemented more recently is that you can do sick leave immediately upon hire. We've done flexible work schedules, telecommuting when possible. We have an employee assistance program, a huge employee assistance program that a lot of people use, not only in our corporate headquarters, but in our restaurants as well. And then the one thing that we're really proud of is our tuition reimbursement. And then also we let folks take personal time off for when they do have family emergencies that just pop up and they don't know about. But just to touch on the tuition part just a little bit, I had to bring some stats with me because it's kind of staggering and it's exciting, but women love education a little bit more than men do. 54% of our employees were reimbursed for tuition were women this last year.
Fantastic.
So in total, it was 1,483. And we spent just short of $4 million on tuition reimbursement for women at Chipotle from January 2016 up until April of 2017.
Wow. Wow.
And then another program that we're excited is we are involved with Guild that helps them with their financial, the whole family with helping with financial and the access to their education. And 58% of our employees who are enrolled in Guild are women. So it just goes to show you that they want to learn, they really want to have more of an education and understand things more. And if a company can do that and help support that, it's tremendous what you get out of it.
Terrific. Thank you very much. And as our last speaker, we are blessed to have with us today Pamela Hardy, who's the Senior People Services Officer at DaVita. Our question for you is, please describe why it's important to create tools to make these practices operational and these policies. How do you do that, and why is it so important?
Yeah, that's a great question. Good afternoon. I'm delighted to be here with you and to learn from each of you and all my fellow panelists. That's a great question. One of the things that we really focus on at DaVita is around leader behavior. It's great to have policies, but policies are only great if they are actually carried out, and they are carried out consistently. And part of, I think, creating an inclusive workplace where everyone can thrive and reach their fullest potential really equates to the consistent application of those policies. So we take a very, I think, real crystal clear approach around creating tools that will drive behaviors, that allows individuals to understand how do they really take advantage, but also which they should expect in terms of from their leader and what the leader should provide to their particular teammate to carry it out. So for instance, we recently rolled out a gender transition playbook. We also are working on a reintegration guide for women and men who are returning from maternity and paternity leave. I mean, you think that it's something that's intuitive. I will tell you, 90% of your employees probably very rarely read the policies. And so if you're really honest when you start to talk to them. And so I think the question is, how do you provide them the step-by-step to say, here's what you should expect, here's what you should deliver, and here's how you're, as a leader, you should engage around this particular topic.
So the idea of the Gender Equity Playbook, that could be a great tool and resource for other organizations. Is that something DaVita would be willing to share?
Absolutely, and I will say, just full sort of transparency, we actually created that with the support of the Human Rights Campaign, which is a leader in the respective sort of area. So one of the things that we are really committed to is not just obviously providing how the policy should be implemented, but really providing that playbook as a platform for learning and expanding the insights with the recognition that everyone approaches differences differently, and given their backgrounds, their definitions, how they understand things, how they transcribe things could be very different. So we really are focused on providing not just sort of, hey, here are the actions, here's a glossary, here's what you should understand, here's what it means in particular instance for the gender transition, here's what it means to transition, here's what you should expect, and oh, by the way, here are the questions that you should ask to really engage appropriately.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
You know, I think if you think across the day, we're beginning to hear some of the elements that need to be in place to actually ever make this real in our workplaces. Values have come up in all of these discussions. Clear tools to help support those, with policies that then reward the people who do the behaviors that go along with those policies. And never forgetting the issue of systemic things that have been built in intentionally decades and decades ago without any consciousness now of pulling them back. I'm going to take, we have just a couple minutes left, so I'm going to ask you one more question because you all gave fantastic examples of how this is working positively. I'm going to push it back to the barrier side for just a minute, and any of you who want to respond, please do. From your perspective, what do you see as the biggest barrier to really implementing and embedding family-friendly policies into the workplace? And once you've named the barrier, what's your best step about breaking through it?
I'll throw out one real quickly, and we'll certainly defer to my other colleagues on the panel, is assumptions. I think that you make assumptions around the needs of your respective employees, and I think oftentimes those assumptions lead to policies that perhaps really have little to no impact. And in some cases, there's a failure to what I call check in to see if those needs change or if, in fact, they need to be evolved in a particular direction. So really that sort of assumption process is something that I would say most cases happens when there's really not a formal check-in process and a speak-up culture that really drives sort of insights around the needs of individuals.
Great, great answer. Somebody else.
As a mayor, I'm often sheltered from the employees. That's kind of how governance works, is that we're up here and we don't get to interact with the employees as much as I would like. And so oftentimes it really is this misunderstanding. And I think that, you know, again, all of these systemic values that were set in place in 1956 when we became a city, a lot of those have still come into play. And so when I bring up, hey, what about a parking place for expectant mothers? You know, the 6 men on my city council go, oh, gee, we didn't think about that. And so it's really about helping them understand, but also for the employees to feel free to come in and just, you know, let us know what it is that they're looking for, because we don't often know. A lot of times we think, look at all the great work we're doing, but we're missing something huge, like not having a lactation place. You know, as a mom myself, there's nothing grosser than going into a bathroom and having to, you know, pump. And so, you know, I really don't want our employees to have to do that. And so I think it's awareness, it's culture, and everything in between.
Perfect. Yeah, please, Susan.
Well, I also think, I think some people mentioned follow through. I think about, okay, so we just did our wage equity study, and like most of the country, we have fewer women in public safety.
Yeah.
We're at 21%, so we're better than the national average by far, and yet that's, anyhow. So I think it's creating an expectation and then following through. There is no try, there's only do. And so go out and recruit female candidates, and it's not enough to just, you know, send out the job description and hope people apply. It's you got to go and figure out how to create that expectation and create a culture around, no, we want you. That's a part of the value. So I do think part of it is you are changing systems, and to insist that people will be rewarded for actually following through and meeting the metrics and recruiting those candidates.
It reminds me that I think many of us who've been around a few decades are surprised to learn at some point that one of the most important qualities that we carry to make these things happen is persistence. If it doesn't happen the first time, you just keep doing it until you accomplish it. Did anyone else want to comment?
I was just going to say, agreeing with these ladies is we're evolving. Our employees today are so different than just 10 years ago.
No kidding.
And what they ask for and what they want, we have got to pay attention to that if we want to be an employer of choice. And we've got to make changes. And if we've got folks in our HR, comps, benefits department that say, well, we've always just done it that way and we can't do that, then challenge them and be persistent and make changes, because you won't be the employer of choice and you're going to be left in the background if you don't start paying attention to what the employees of today want.
Perfect. Steve, I think you wanted to respond, and we'll close then.
So two pieces that go together is, one is the invisibility of dominant culture, and then what happens when you disrupt it is people get uncomfortable, and people don't like being uncomfortable. And so there is it is that anticipation and normalization of that, the fact that I become uncomfortable. So if suddenly there is a lactation room in our office, which used to be a room I used or needed, and now my life is a little bit less convenient, and I don't understand why, to normalize that there's going to be some discomfort, anxiety, frustration, whatever it might be, but to have a way to talk through it, and also to say, and this is part of what it means for us to be making this shift and to be, creating a more inclusive culture.
Excellent. Join me in thanking this terrific panel.